down. Welcome to DiversiTrials and Tribulations, where we break down the latest FDA revelations. EAPs, that's the talk of the day. Diversity action plans paving the way. Diversity and trials, that's what we preach. Inclusivity for all, it's within our reach. FDA's draft, we're breaking it down. All diversity trials, the best part around. FDA, please, we need the shift. Diversity and trials, let's uplift. DAP, yeah, you know me. Inclusivity for all, it's the key. Diversity and trials, that's what we preach. Inclusivity for all, it's within our reach. FDA's draft, we're breaking it down. All diversity trials, the best part around.
All right. Hello. Hottie, Mitch. I miss seeing you in person, but it's nice to see you online.
I know. It's only been a couple days, but it feels like forever.
I know. Welcome, Diversa family. If you are watching this now or later in the future, welcome, Diversa family, to the official DiversiTrials and Tribulations podcast public forum dedicated to the FDA's Diversity Action Plan, the draft. This is our opportunity as a community to come together, to look at this draft, to look at what the FDA is proposing as a guidance, and as a public entity, let the FDA know what we think. How's this going to work in real life? What's going to happen when we apply these standards to clinical research from our different perspectives? It doesn't matter if you're a site, a sponsor, a CRO, if you are in this industry, if you're a trial participant. This is going to significantly influence how the FDA is going to review and assess the safety and tolerability across the entire industry for new drug applications and approvals. So this is going to be very, very important. Mitch, Hadi, what do you think?
We kicked it off a couple weeks ago. So June 29th, for everyone's reference, was when the FDA draft DAP guidance came out. We followed up shortly after that in discussion. We were like, okay, well, look, we know we want to do these sessions. Let's figure it out, make it happen. We took some of the feedback from that initial session on what people would like to see and how we'd like to see this play out, and how we'd like to see it build out. And we've developed this approach. Unfortunately, with travels to the Houston area over the past couple weeks and everything we've had going on there, we were unable to jump in and immediately start these meetings and these reviews like we had intended. But it was tough following the hurricane. We didn't have the best connection and availability and access at the time. However, what we did in the meantime, though, in the background, was really work on how we were going to take this approach and how we want to move forward with this presentation. And ultimately, we're breaking it down into sections like initially planned. If anyone is on YouTube, hopefully a lot on LinkedIn as well. But there's a couple comments I've already added on LinkedIn is the point. The first one is an Adobe document, and we're going to do one of these for each section that we go through. This video today and this section today is going to be the introduction and background. So it's just cut and pasted for those sections. And we're going to add, it's open so anybody can get on the link and add comments as we go through. What I want to do is leave that open throughout the weekend because we're doing these on Fridays. So I'll leave it open at least through the weekend for people to catch up. And, I was talking about it before we jumped on, and research is also like a hobby of mine. So, I think it's pretty relevant and for most people in this industry, they kind of share that same aspect. It doesn't really matter when and where. It's not like you're punching out on on Friday at 5 or 6 p.m. and then you just don't do anything over the weekend. Everyone tends to stay engaged. So we're going to keep the engagement going. If anybody has comments outside of that they want to specifically leave related to the guidance and in these sections, feel free to ping us. I've already been talking to several people about how to leave comments and where to leave comments and how they can get involved in our feedback and our comments. So just let us know at any point in time. But comments are going to be open on the Adobe document through the weekend. And the other fun thing we did while we were not doing these sessions was we created these AI videos. Obviously, they weren't real actors. I think it's pretty obvious when they don't blink for a whole 2 minutes at a time. But what we wanted to do was make an audio retelling, if you will, of the draft guidance, just because it's a lot for people to digest at once. I know I didn't enjoy reading it the first couple times, and I still don't think I will enjoy reading it as I go through. But I have noticed, at least this morning when I was reading through the intro and background again, while reading along essentially with
that was cool
speaking, it did make it a lot easier, and you're getting it from multiple points. It really just helps ingrain the information in your head so you can wrap your head around a little bit easier. But the audio, you can throw it on YouTube and play it in the car or wherever while you're driving, picking up groceries, whatever it looks like for you. So just something to help you stay engaged a little bit easier instead of having to dedicate the time to sit down and read.
And Mitch, I have to tell you, that was perfect for me. It was like a book on tape. I had the guidance out on paper, looking through it, and as I was listening to it read, it finally started clicking. I finally understood everything that they were doing. It was great. I have to ask though, running an AI system like that, how in the world did you get it to say as a virus? What? How?
I don't know.
That was awesome. It was like I felt like I was talking to a person, and there was a little humanity in that AI video.
Yeah. I mean, I think those little speech aspects of the humanity in there make up for the Polar Express eyes that a lot of the characters have.
Yeah, the voices. Yeah,
right.
So if you haven't had a chance to check out those videos, the DiversiTeam has done an amazing job putting those together, developing them, just helping you to understand this guidance. I can't stress enough how important this guidance is going to be for our industry, even for our society when we really start to dig into this. And I look forward to that. Hadi, I wanted to give you a chance real quick before we start. Introduce yourself, maybe talk about your impressions on the guidance that, just these first two sections. We'll just talk about that.
Right. So, been involved in diversity, and I thought that was very timely, from the FDA part to really get engaged and engage people or in the industry and partners in this action plan. Very timely. So as Mitch and you said, it was a little dry, and I really, really love the idea that we put it up in AI and have this audio file. So it made more sense, as you said, it started clicking in Dr. Fox. So that's an opportunity for all of us to really dig deep, provide significant feedback beyond just complaints and how is this not effective or applicable or feasible. We just want to turn. Because I've had the chance to really read through very few. I know there is a lot right now. Very few of those comments that have been made public through the FDA page, and the industry is trying to really get away from it right now, or at least share concerns and challenges. We're just We're here to just actually turn the wheel and try to enforce how significant and positive it is, and how is it that we can actually help the industry do that.
And that's actually a perfect segue. So. While we get started, do me a favor. If you're watching this right now, I see a comment from Kelvin. So Kelvin, if you're there, go down to the LinkedIn comments and see if you can't find that Adobe file. Try to click on that and see if you can make a comment. I'd love to see comments in this file. You're going to see this on screen here in a minute. I want to present something real quick because Hadi, you're spot on. Thank you so much for introducing that. But we're going to talk about how in the world you can look at this world. So this right here is the FDA's website for the Diversity Action Plan and Improvement Enrollment. If you look at these two screens, you can actually look at the official Federal Register on this button. this button here will actually take you to the PDF document that is the draft guidance. If you scroll down just a moment, it says that we have to submit comments by 9/26/2024. That's really, really important. And this is one thing I do want to note is, it's going to say, this is how you submit guidance or comments. You can mail it or you can do it electronically. If you click on this button here, it says literally submit comments online. That's pretty intuitive, right? So you just click on this and you submit comments. Unfortunately, it's not quite like that. When you click on that submit comments button, you go to the general document, the non-ruling docket of this guidance. And so you have 3 different tabs. You've got the docket details, where you're going to see that it's open. That's the progress of it. We're looking at it right now. The actual docket documents. So this is what the FDA is posting in the notices and any of the updates. You might have some. You can do like search within time. And what I really want everyone to look at here is all comments on docket. So this is a big deal. There's 113 comments right now across the industry on this docket. The very first one right now, the most recent one, the first one ever was the comment from Regeneron. You can click on these and they're either PDF files that were written by big organizations. You can tell their regulatory specialists documented this and put it with lawyers and made an official public statement like the big organizations. You've got groups from, you might recognize some of these. We've got Regeneron, we've got Merck, we've got societies. Michael Caldwell, big shout out to Dr. Caldwell over in Nashville, Tennessee. He's one of my favorite individuals and advocates. Jen Miller, you've got all of these groups. But there's one thing that I did want to note, and we all know that diversity is contentious and there's people who they're not too sure about it. But I would encourage you to go to the search bar when you're in these comments and just type anonymous. Because obviously, if someone wants to be anonymous, there's a reason. And some of these it's what I really want to focus on. This would be an entire podcast. I don't want this to take up the time, but I did want to bring up one. If you go to if you search for anonymous and you look at the post that was done July 1st, 2024, and you click on that, I'm just going to read this out loud to you because I know it's tiny on the screen, but I want you to really think about this. And I'd really like to revisit this. It says, this is a well-intentioned guidance that has nasty second and third order consequences. This will make clinical trials more expensive to run. It will lead to delays. It will jeopardize clinical development programs. Sponsors will spend money on ED and I consultants and CRO solutions, but ultimately achieve nothing. I don't know about you, my blood's starting to boil. I would love to talk about this, but the FDA is trying to solve systemic issues through clinical trial enrollment. The sponsor of these studies is carrying bigger social obligations than our government. I'm glad you stayed anonymous because I'm sure you'd get haters, Mr. Anonymous or Mrs. Anonymous, but there are so many myths and misunderstandings in this section right here that I would like to revisit later with the public's permission. Maybe this is its own podcast, but I am going to say one thing. FDA doesn't care about how much it costs to do the trial. That is never an excuse, and don't ever use that again. There are ways to save money and to do this responsibly so that we can include everyone. And that's where I'm going to stop on that. I would encourage each and every one of you over the next 8 weeks to engage with this website right here, look at the comments as they grow, and importantly, at DiversiTrials, we're going to sit here and show you eventually how to make comments, because you can't do it simply by clicking on that button. It took some Google searches and some understandings, but we're going to get there. On that note, let's get down to the nitty gritty. So I'm going to stop screen here. I would like to open that comment up to each of you really quickly, and then we're going to go into why we're here in the first place.
Well, the comment section as a whole, I know I kicked it off that the new FDA DAP draft guidance was just released, right? June 26th, 2024. So you see comments all the way back from June 2022. And for those of you who didn't really do a deep dive into the intro, it's something we'll get into, but the whole docket in and of itself goes back to April 2022 guidance. So it's not like this is anything new or groundbreaking or anyone should be shocked or surprised by this, but it was the diversity plans to improve enrollment of participants from underrepresented racial and ethnic populations in clinical trials, all the way back in April 2022. So I guess a good question, to Anonymous would be what from April 2022 have you seen different and shocking, and that's put an increased cost on CROs or sponsors, to date? Because we're over 2 years from the initial guidance that came out. So I don't know. I mean, yeah, like you said, it's frustrating. You take it.
It's frustrating.
That's exactly the point. I mean, this has been, in the works for a couple of years at least, and the FDA planted many seeds along the way, and it's a little surprising to me personally to see all those comments, like, trying to say, it's like as if this is the first time they're reading it, right? And there are so many challenges. Like, you've had 2 years to really think about these things, and these are not really true challenges. These are like opportunities for you to improve and make a significant dent in the industry, or at least create some positive social change. So yes, I will take those comments and challenges into considerations. But I'm going to emphasize this again and again and over again, that we need to turn these challenges into opportunities.
Yep, and I agree.
And
that's another podcast, but
yeah, and that honestly, the comment is great. I love it. Simply for the fact that we're encouraging everyone to get in and read comments and participate and be part of the conversation, right? That's why we are going to put together these like SWOT analyses of these different sections.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, and let's make that part of it. Let's figure that out.
Yeah.
All right. So let's get right down to it. So for all of those of you who are just joining in or just watching, Mitch has posted an Adobe file link in the comments. That is a public. Please go in there, click on something. You can comment. You can give a thumbs up. You can show how you feel about it. Whatever it is, this is a public forum designed so that you, our community on LinkedIn, our industry, whatever it might be, has the opportunity. Here's your platform, your Manasa, right, Heidi, to truly be a part of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen, and I want to make sure that it's up to date. I want to make sure that I give you the best possible opportunity here. But let's start digging into this, right? So we created an Adobe file here. This is all of the introduction, and if you scroll down, there's no footnotes. So we'll talk about footnotes here in a minute. We want to make sure that we can address those. There's a couple things maybe to touch in the footnotes, but it's not really worth having in here. But we've got an introduction we're going to go through, and we've got a background, and that's all we have in this document. So if you are in this link, go through this. If you read the document, put your comments. What do you like? What do you not like? What are you concerned about? What are you excited about? Let's talk about this. So we're going to start at the very beginning. Introduction. Mitch and Hadi, I want to let you start first. Just go through your comments on maybe just this first section. What really popped out at you? And even if it was in like April 2022 or anything like that, honestly, I didn't do this kind of an intense deep dive into the April 2022. So some of this is new to me, and it might be new to our audience. Tell me your initial, what do you think?
First of all, Dr. Fox, I just want to make sure that the Adobe is actually in the public comment section.
Yeah, it is. So Mitch just posted that right before we started, right before the recording. You'll see an Adobe link. It's one of the very first links that you can see when you go in the LinkedIn Live.
Okay, wonderful. So the first thing that really, caught my attention, so to speak, is that, first of all, FDA's different departments were involved, which is great. And then especially with the, they got the Office of Minority Health and Health Equity, and that's all centers within the government. That's a great start. And now we really, truly appreciate and we're very grateful for the fact that they're opening it up for, advocacy groups, other associations, and the industry to really, chime in and provide some significant feedback. I would love for the next round, before the implementation, or if there's any draft, or if it's prolonged to to have some kind of a consortium from the advocacy groups and not the industry, but at least from the advocacy groups to be, or associations to be part of this, progress. The second thing that I actually wanted to bring up is that at the beginning of section 1, which is the introduction, basically, or at least the second page where it says on line 30 and 31, it started talking about the FDA will submit an annual report to Congress that summarizes the aggregate of diversity plans received from clinical studies. So I'm just wondering, how is that? How can we actually play a role in that? That's my biggest question. It's like, okay, I understand the FDA and the Congress would be actually communicating and presenting something to the Congress, but again, I would like to see some advocacy groups, including us as DiversiTrials or other associations being part of this process as well.
That's a really good point, Hadi. What is that report, that annual report, going to look like when FDA submits it to Congress?
Right.
Is it going to be? Yeah. Is it going to be by trial? Is it going to be by indication? Is it going to be by enrollment target? Like, what is in that report? That would be a really, really good.
Right. I'd like to take a look at it and just keep an eye on what's going on before presenting it to Congress.
Yeah. Or will those reports be public? Will that be public at all?
Right. It should be public because it does say it's going to be published on the agency's website, so I'd imagine it's public.
Yeah.
But I did see there too that it seems to be specifically focused on the studies that conducted whether or not they met their demographic enrollment goals.
So it will be by study, and it's probably going to be a yes or no.
Right.
Yeah. So I just would like to know or get more info or more details, more insights on how is that going to be presented, how is that going to be reported and presented to Congress. I mean, the other thing that I really wanted to find out, like they talk about requests for waivers, but they don't. For now, I just like to know more about, maybe this will be coming down, in subsequent sections. But just heads up, I'd love to actually look into those.
Yeah, and Hadi, that's a really, really good point. So after, and this is, you remember I said I read these 3 times? There's a reason for that, because kind of like when you read a book first and the second, you see things coming that you weren't expecting. So after I read it 3 times, I realized that this introduction is textbook grant executive summary. Everything that you see in this introduction is a little tidbit, a little hint about what you're going to see in the guidance on each of these sections. So it's very, very good summary. It's kind of like, oh, okay, this is kind of what we're going to talk about. It gets us on the right page. I did have a favorite word over on, it was line 22 through 24. Where am I? 22 to 24. Okay, so diversity action plans are intended to increase enrollment of participants who are members of historically underrepresented populations in clinical studies to help improve the strength and generalizability, say that 10 times fast, of the evidence for the intended use of the population. That I feel is probably one of the strongest sentences in this introduction, primarily because that's your why and what you're doing for jabs. So what do you think, Mitch?
I was going to call attention to that line as well, or those, I guess, 3, but that sentence in general. Because to me, kind of along the lines with the anonymous comment before and cost and everything and developing drugs, it's the impactful portion of that is right there at the very end for the intended use population.
Yeah.
Who's going to use your drugs at the end of the day, right? I mean, I guess it's a question to sponsors when you should be thinking about developing your DAPs is who. I mean, you're not just marketing it to one particular population, are you? Right? You want everybody to take your drug. Therefore, you need to make sure that your drug is safe for everybody. That's the whole goal. That's the end goal. That's it, right? And increase enrollment of participants who normally haven't been. I saw an interesting thing this morning on LinkedIn, and I mean, I've seen them thousands of times, right? But it's essentially this back and forth that people struggle with. Typically it's white people that struggle with it. Or anybody that feels like, well, now we want other people to be included too, means that it's going to take away from you, right? So it was a little infographic. It shows like the this white person, they've got like a couple hurdles on this track, great, and then all the additional hurdles and a ball and chain, and everybody else.
Yeah, for the other
they have additional
populations.
struggles. And then what they feel like it looks like is that then now, you know, the white population is going to have all these, now they're going to have the ball and chain and these additional hurdles and all these struggles just by making it easier for everybody else, when the actuality is that we just want a level playing field for everyone.
Yeah.
So
It's
inclusion
equality.
is easy and equal for everyone. It's not going to make it harder or more difficult. It's not going to, this shouldn't be like, oh, well, we're going to, I've actually heard some comments and feedback. Essentially, it's like, okay, well now, you know, we're potentially decreasing the efficacy for, or in safety, tolerability, et cetera, for Caucasian patients population.
That's not how it works, guys.
Yeah,
That's
right.
not how it works.
You got to be kidding me. But like also in that same token, it's like, okay, well, so if that's a concern you have, why would you not want others to be included? Like you don't.
Yeah.
That's essentially the whole guidance to me is approaching that topic.
So I mean, I wanna make sure we get through everything. And we don't have to stop at an hour, but I do want to try to be respectful of everyone's times. And actually,
I'll touch on Hadi's point as well when it talks about, you know, the annual submission to Congress. I guess I'm curious more so that I haven't been able to find an answer as to why. What is the purpose and what's the expected outcome, or what are we looking at? Like, really, what's the goal with submitting these to Congress? I mean, I think publishing on this website is great. It's
that might be a matter of going back to Fedora. Is there even a consequence? You know, are you going to get a slap on the hand? Or, I mean, and we see that later. FDA makes it very clear what's going to happen if you don't do DAPs, and that's in a future section. But
to me, it sounds more like probably a funding thing, right? You know, are we going to these initiatives? And, you know, money goes through Congress. It happens.
There's your purse strings. Got to keep the purse
strings.
Probably
probably budget related as to why those reports are going through, to see overall as a whole, you know, how well we're doing at meeting these goals and these initiatives.
So we're about 27 minutes in. We haven't even touched the introduction. But just in general, the first paragraph of introduction is like, hey, here's all the guidances. This is what we're following. This is why we're doing it. Your second paragraph, it pretty much just said FDA is issuing this guidance to satisfy Fedora. So it's saying, you know, we're being compliant. This is our pathway to compliance per Congress and our statutory levels. And then it referenced April 22. In other words, this replaces this. This happens a lot in legalese and regulatory, where, you know, it's saying, you know, if you're reading April 2022, you're wrong. This is the new, you know, our new level. How do you feel about this one, guys? The grandfathering and compliance issue. So I get it. You got to have a stop point. You got to do this, but it feels like you're creating a little bit of a loophole for sponsors to apply to this.
We had car conversations about this.
Yeah.
So I know we might not be totally aligned here, actually, which is great. But yeah, obviously you have to have some sort of cutoff period, right? That makes sense.
It makes
sense.
So
historically speaking, then too, the further we go back and we look at like drugs, just aspirin, for example, right? I mean, there's been so much additional data that's been collected on like aspirin or acetaminophen as a whole at this point through like phase 4 real world evidence, that I think we're well beyond it for a lot of drugs. But you know, it would be nice to potentially some of the afternoon thoughts that I've had. It would be nice to potentially create for some of these within some reasonable parameter, some expectation of follow up and additional data collection and intentional, you know.
Well, and I was like, okay, so we know that the lack of safety evidence in populations is a major participant patient risk. And we've identified that. But at the same time, we're creating a timeline where it's like, well, we know it's a risk, but as long as you get it within this timeline, it's okay. We'll grandfather you in.
Right.
So that was my first like knee jerk. And then as I read this, there is actually a reference to a guide that came out in August of last year. And it's one of the footnotes, believe it or not. So on page 4, so it's not on here. So if you're looking at the guidance later on, it's on page 4. It's footnote number 14. There was an FDA guidance for industry on post-market approaches to obtain data on populations underrepresented in clinical trials for drugs and biological products. So FDA kind of preventively in August put out a guidance that helped sponsors to understand how they could collect these data after approval. I don't know if you remember, but I talked about phase 5 last time, like what's with phase 5. I think FDA was kind of touching on that last August. They put this out, we talk about rabbit holes. That's my rabbit hole. I want to go look at that guidance and understand how FDA expects sponsors to collect post-market data to try to increase the safety and tolerability.
Well, that's kind of what I'm talking about here too, and I know we discussed it a little bit briefly before. Currently we're seeing a lot of like these post-marketing commitments, PMCs, and it's like, okay, well, there's no one actually like holding your feet to the fire. I mean, post-marketing commitments sound great in concept and theory, but if they're not actually committed and you don't have any follow through, it's just talk for the purpose of talk to maybe make yourself look a little bit better. So I think that's what I would like to maybe see potentially here in developing comments and feedback is this interim gap. So we need to have these parameters, and maybe through a certain time frame, we say, hey, we would like to see some post-marketing commitments, within a certain like application or approval date for some of these drugs, biologics, devices, etc.
Well, if I may interject here, and I'm not trying to like really be a pain, but if we go back to line 45 and 46, what really piqued my interest here is it says this guidance is not intended to address all issues related to the clinical development of medical products, such as the design of clinical studies. How can you not get into the studies when you're really, wanting to really increase participation in clinical studies?
That's a good point, Hadi. Especially statistics wise, this is going to affect your in value.
Well, and I keep on preaching whenever I talk about this, that we have to start with the design and how we can incorporate all those approaches and new, fresh look on how we can actually increase awareness and participation in clinical studies. So don't tell me that you're not going to actually look at the design. So that's my own interpretation. That really bothered me somehow.
No, you're absolutely right. It's contradictory to itself already in the introduction, which is a little odd. I should just get like ICH E8 tattooed on my forearm or something at this point, because that's
quality by design.
Quality by design. Yeah, that's what they talk about earlier on. It's the sponsor's goals for enrollment, blah blah blah. But
we're not going to touch on the design.
It's not going to touch design at all. We want to make enrollment easier, and they actually recommend. Not specifics, but one of the recommendations, later on in the guidance is increasing or making enrollment and inclusion exclusion criteria easier for people to participate, as long as it doesn't affect, those statistically significant endpoints at the end of the day.
We need diversity by design is what we need.
Right. I love.
And actually there's a comment later on, and I think it's in the background. So I do want to get to that. We're at 34 minutes in, but just so we didn't go through the whole thing, but FDA is allowing 180 days following the publication of the final guidance, and the enrollment scheduled to begin 180 days after the publication of the guidance. So in other words, the FDA, as far as biologics go, they're allowing like a 1-year window of grandfathering.
That's right.
And I like what Mitch said. It's like, well, if you're going to allow a 1 year window, we get it. You've probably already started planning. You've got to redo things. That's fine. But we've identified this as a significant safety issue, and we really need you to have some kind of a post-market commitment so that you can get this up to speed. At the very least, only approve the drug for certain demographics. Like, we got to figure out something so that we can protect everyone who might be part of this.
Can you do me a favor and try to refresh your comments, Vox? Because Kelvin's been in here and he's added something.
Yep.
A couple of things, actually.
So meanwhile, I read some of the comments from the FDA public page, and some people are complaining about how we included epidemiology to be a part of looking at the prevalences and incidence and prevalences of diseases. And it's like, epidemiology has no place in this. It's like, oh, excuse me. So that was something that really, again, disturbed me somehow. But yeah, just wanted to throw this out.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, we're going to try to figure this out. We're going to look at Kelvin's comments as we go. I'm going to ask Mitch to send me a new link just to make sure that I have the right one. In the meantime, I did want to go to the next part. It's pretty much, when we talk about introduction, we were going through this. It's a pretty good introduction. It kind of talks about the past, talks about this. We went through the timelines. And in general, now this is interesting. This is very, very boilerplate for FDA. This is not legal. This is not enforceable. This is only a recommendation. However, and this is the new paragraph, and I'll read this out because it's super duper important. As an exception to this framework, meaning the whole this is just a recommendation thing, this derives from the requirement of section 3601 of FDORA for FDA to specify in guidance the form and manner for the submission of diversity action plans. Accordingly, I love the word insofar. It's one of my favorite words. As section 7 of this document specifies, the form and manner for submission of a diversity action plan, by the way, you need to capitalize that P, FDA. It will have binding effect, once this guidance is finalized, as indicated by the use of the words must, shall, and required. So as you go through this document, be sure that you pay attention to those 3 words because they're very, very important on our guidance for this industry. Must, shall, and required. Let me see if I can.
That applies to this industry as a whole, and it is a constant pain point, right? Like anybody who's read, any protocol for any phase of study, you run across those issues. It's like expected to, required, shall, must, should, or could, or may. It's like, well, can we clarify exactly if we need to? Should we? But we don't have to. I don't really understand how we're using these terms here. So it's a great point to address the importance of these words in the document for sure.
Well, and we kind of touched on this, but there are so many sponsors I'm talking to right now. They're saying, if I feel like it, I know all these loopholes, and I really don't want. Do you realize how much that's going to cost me? Heard a bunch of them. Roll my eyes. I understand it, but I think that's very short-sighted, and I think you can do this. So, Kelvin, thank you for tuning in. I apologize for the tech problems here. There's a lot of things. Kelvin, he writes here. He says. Clarity and historical context, include a brief section acknowledging past issues and mistrust. I love it, Kelvin. We can go to Tuskegee. We can talk about GCP. You can talk about a lot of that. I think some of that might be in the footnotes, Kelvin. If you look at, and the footnotes aren't in here, but if you read the footnotes, there's some really nice review articles on that, and maybe they're just trying to save real estate. Highlight key changes, provide a summary of key changes or new requirements introduced by FDORA and how they improve. Very, very good idea. Maybe you don't want to repeat FDORA at all. That's why they put it in the footnotes, but maybe just the highlights of why it's important.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a great point. You get those with anything, especially in research, you come up with a new protocol. It's like, okay, well, what's actually changed?
Yeah, summary of changes. And it might be worth it to check out that link because I think FDA, they have a pretty good doc control system in the docket itself. Look and see what they changed throughout the dates. And, that is documented in some place. So Kelvin, let's see. So we did expansion of historical mistrust. We want to include success stories. I love that. Don't just focus on the negative. Let's talk about the positive. What have we actually accomplished across here? The fact that Fedora is in law tells us that we've got a number of things going for us. This is a big deal, and it's very important to a lot of people. And it might be good to point that out. Well, with your permission, everyone, I'd love to hear more, but I'd like to jump into background because we're about 40 minutes in.
Yeah. Let's keep chugging away.
Sure.
I mean, I think we talked about it beforehand, and there really wasn't an expectation. I think most people, from what we've heard, and I mean, most of my comments are more pertaining to like 5 and 7, some of the bulkier sections.
Mm-hmm. And I do want to, I'll just touch a couple of things. So there's a line 82 and 83. I did really appreciate the word disproportionate burden of certain conditions or diseases. So the term disproportionate burden I think it's very representative for what we're talking about here. In other words, we're approving drugs for populations that don't have an opportunity to be represented in clinical trials. I think that is very critical, and it's really good to the mission of FDA. And also, line 92 through 97. Hey, anonymous, if you're out there and you're watching this, I highly encourage you to read those lines. If anything, just read those lines in this document, because that tells you why this is an important thing, not only for safety and tolerability, but it's going to help your business. You'll be doing okay when you can open up your drug to more populations that benefit from it. So let's stop with the myths. Before I go further, I don't like taking the mic. Hadi, Mitch, what do you think about the initial background paragraph?
Well, I'm going to tag. I'll tag the Cara Group in the comments. Cara Group is an organization we have recently become more involved with and affiliated with, per se. Ultimately, the Cara Group has been doing some of this research and legwork for a while, and they're actually evaluating the disease burden and prevalence based off of ethnicity. Now, they're still on Big Five when it comes to race and ethnicity. So something we're working on to address as well. But ultimately, for every new drug that comes out, they're creating these scorecards, and I absolutely love them. It does a breakdown of how the trial did. They're taking into consideration statistically the disease prevalence and populations and things like that as well. And also, just in general, when it comes to certain drugs that are for rare diseases, maybe there are ultra rare conditions that doesn't occur a lot. So it's really, really challenging to get, a great diverse population to be represented because it is so rare. And then that it's all taken into consideration is my point. So the scorecards are fantastic. But that's really like what we're talking about. And when you call out anonymous again, it's like, it's talk about disproportionate burden for certain conditions. It's like, okay, you have 86% research representation in a sickle cell trial. Fantastic. But if you talk about disproportionate burden, you just like exclude African-American population down to maybe like 13% participation in the clinical trial. It's like, okay, well, what are you doing? And that's not to say that it should be statistically proportionate, right? And I don't think that statistical proportion of disease prevalence should equate directly with how these DAPs are put together, right? So if it's 43% Caucasian, that doesn't mean you need to have 43% of your patient enrollment be Caucasian. That's not accurate. I think to attain statistical relevance, you need to achieve a certain number of representation from each demographic as a whole.
By indication. So and that's later on, but they're saying like you can go by social demographics as like a plan B.
Yeah.
At the very least, you could try that, but they really want to look at indication.
Right.
And Hadi, Hadi, this one was for you. But this line number 82, underrepresented, you see that little 10 right there? If you look at the footnote number 10, that's where it spells out all the different demographics in there. And I mean, it's pretty comprehensive. However, FDA, I'd love to put this in the comments, but Federal Register number 15 has officially identified the Middle Eastern North African population
Right.
on the U.S. Census, and therefore I would recommend you include MENA in the footnotes, just like you included all the other census relevant demographics in the
And thank
footnotes.
you, Dr. Fox, really for bringing this up, because this actually piqued my, it caught my attention. It's like, they just came out with the Directive 15, and they should be on board with probably following up on that with their listing here. So
Mhm.
MENA should definitely be part of this. Specifically being mentioned and listed here.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I mean, even the length of some of these trials, if you're looking at starting up a new study and you're projecting 5-6 years out and you're excluding the MENA population at this point in your demographics that you're collecting, you're behind the 8 ball significantly.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So this is now I kind of, we're kind of poking and prodding this little FDA thing here a little bit, but we are going to start to get into some content here. So line numbers number 110 and 114. So FDA is starting to tease you with their grocery list. These are our expectations of what you should have in your DAP. And specifically like those lines, let's see, where is it? It says factors to consider. Well, let's see, you're looking at right there. Factors to consider when setting enrollment goals include demographic characteristics such as race, ethnicity, sex, age group, clinical characteristics such as presence of comorbidities and disease etiology, and other characteristics such as access to standard preventative care and diagnostic care,
Right.
access to standard treatments to others. So now we're talking about socioeconomic status.
Right.
And we'll stop there, but it talks about how FDA has previously published these things and they put that in the footnotes. We'll talk about that here in a minute, but what do you think about the FDA's considerations for factors to consider as far as a DAP program?
I mean, demographic characteristics and clinical characteristics this is a must. I mean, they all have to really provide their plans and break it down according to these characteristics with the subgroup analysis. Now, I read some of the comments and the public comments that they were like, how in the world are we going to actually get information on SES, socioeconomic status? It's like some countries do not really allow us to collect this kind of information.
So I will point you to, has anyone heard of the United Way?
Mm-hmm.
So the United Way has done a very good job with what they call the ALICE Index, ALICE, ALICE, and it is a very good scoring system of socioeconomic status based off of access to internet, based off of rent, based off of all these things. In other words, it's a score on poverty is what they're looking at. And that can be one component. There are metrics in place that are measuring these things right now. There are things that we can pull from the public sector to understand how we can include these populations based off of their need for the drug that is under assessment. And I think that, like you said, Hadi, that is critical. It's interesting that they have all these factors to consider. And in this section, at least, they're not saying a factor to consider is the prevalence of disease in that demographic. But they say that earlier. They said it on the previous one, basically, this demographic, if they undergo this disease or this indication, that's what we're going to look at. But they didn't include it on this line. And I think it's very, very interesting.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Even earlier on, again, another one of those like almost contradictory points is 10 starts with 101 and really 102. It mentions general measures to enhance diversity in clinical studies, broadening of eligibility criteria.
Yeah.
Right. So we're already back to like
but not clinical study design.
No,
not at all.
Just broadening your eligibility.
Just criteria.
Yeah, when it's scientifically appropriate.
Yeah, as long as you can do that. And the other one, so Hadi, this matches you, and it's kind of what Metra's saying, but line number 106, right? Such measures include starting with intention and deliberateness. How can you do that without clinical trial design?
That's exactly true, and I highlighted this on my, version. It's like, It's like, okay, I mean, is this oxymoron or what is going on here?
Well, you know what's going on. It's multiple authors that didn't talk to each other.
Yeah.
I can almost guarantee you it's a bunch of people who put a bunch of paragraphs together and didn't talk to each other.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And this is how it feels, to be honest with you. It's like it's not coherent. It's not smooth.
Yeah.
I've heard some feedback specifically, probably pertaining to this section and others, because I don't see a mention of education in here really anywhere.
Yeah.
And that's something that I know one of our colleagues would probably like to speak on, or at least add some comments. I don't know if she's ready to jump on and speak about it, but we'll see if we can get her there and bring her on to talk about her takes there and her perspectives. But
so do you mean education of the individual, like their educational status, like socioeconomic status, or education of healthcare education? What define education?
Increase awareness, maybe.
Yeah, I think that's more what it is increased awareness, and that's not necessarily awareness. I think awareness is almost too vague. Like, that clinical trials are a thing. I think most people understand that they exist. And not necessarily just awareness of opportunities, but more specific education around that awareness. So with the awareness should come some degree of education, I think, hopefully all the time.
And this brings up a whole different, Pandora's box. Like, how about cultural sensitivity and sensitivity training?
Correct.
Even with PI, naive PIs, I mean, there should be a whole list of initiatives there.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure that is baked into Section 5.
Yeah.
So that we're getting ahead, but those are strategies, but we're not necessarily still in the FDA's expectations or the background or what they think should happen as a result of the DAP. So maybe we're getting a little ahead of ourselves on that one.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think with the background though, it's we saw something a couple weeks back. I know, Fox, we had discussed it. I think it was actually Myra. Myra had posted something regarding this NIH-funded study, and it was like, oh, well, they're just poor, so we're gonna pay for them to get rides, and that's gonna increase enrollment. It's like, well, all right, no.
Where's the daycare? I mean, there's all
right. So when it really comes to like the background, I think that's where the education aspect comes into play here, is that inform and educate the populations and the diverse populations on the clinical trials themselves, and really what those goals and outcomes are going to potentially look like for themselves and for future generations. I think that's a big aspect of the importance behind these initiatives as a whole. So it plays into the background for me pretty significantly.
Yeah. So I've only got 2 more comments, and then Mitch, how's the comments looking? Is anyone else providing things I need to refresh?
I don't have anything else on PDF comments.
Okay. Yeah. And Kelvin, if you can't do it on PDF, send it over in LinkedIn, man. We'll get it over here. We'll just take our own notes and we'll get you on here.
Yeah, and to that point too, like I know I said people can like reach out and add comments or provide comments. If people don't want their name associated, like if you want to leave anonymous comments, I'm not sure how you would do that with like.
You'd have to log in, but I mean, if you want to be anonymous, just send us an anonymous post, an anonymous IM, whatever it might be. Point is, share your voice. This is your public forum. We need to all come together.
You can leave anonymous. I mean, jump in the DiversiTrials webpage and leave a comment there for feedback, right? I'll get your email if you leave it there, and you can just put your name in as anonymous, and that's perfectly fine too. And just say that you want to leave comments regarding FDA DAPs, or just tell me you like my Batman shirt. That's fine.
So beyond the intended use population, which I love this term, as Daniel mentioned, on line 104, I love the fact that they say improve evidence generation for the population for which the medical product is being developed. I mean, these are like, really, I like the wording, I must say.
And just, we're gonna do an example here, but Hadi likes this wording. So I'm going to select what it wants. I'm going to right click on it right here, and I'm going to say, looks great. Right? And there you go. You can put a little emoji right there. So this is a very interactive document. We want the community to come through here and to put your comments, put what you like, what you don't like, what, you know, make your changes. This is your public forum. This is your mic. No excuses, my friends. This is your chance to talk. I know we're coming up to the end of the hour. I have 2 more comments I wanted to bring up, if that's okay with the team. Number 1 is line 120 through 121, and this is one of my predictions that I had. But it says, in addition, a new drug application must, there's your must. Remember we talked about musts back there? Must present effectiveness and safety data by race, gender, and age, and two musts must be important, identify any modifications or dose intervals needed for a specific subgroup. There's no way you can do that without changing your clinical design, because that right there is phase 1. You're doing PK and you are looking at sub studies. That's my prediction.
I love it. Yes.
And that's a great point you bring up when you talk about phase 1s. I think we touched on it the first time we talked about it, after the initial review, and we all read it over and we're all frustrated and had headaches. But it's, you know, the DAP guidance is really like for phase 3 studies. You know, it's not talking, and we should be talking, right? That's my goal whenever we're interacting or engaging with a sponsor or CRO, you know, depending on where they're at in the phase of their drug development process. This should be from the very beginning. It's not just, oh, we have to think about DAPs for phase 3. Well, you've already screwed up, honestly.
You should have done that, but when you were planning it, because what you're looking at is a PK study subarms for every demographic of target. And you better be doing that in phase 1. Otherwise, you know what you're going to do at phase 3? FDA is going to look at that and say, you didn't do your back work. You didn't do your homework. Go back, do a validation PK study, and come back when you have more data.
Yeah. And it, you know, later on in the guidance, it does talk about, you know, PKs and pharmacodynamics, so PKs and PDs as well. So it's mentioned in here. So it's a great point. If you're not doing the legwork to begin with, it's gonna catch up with you eventually.
Yeah. You know, there's an old saying for all of my QA folks out there: if you stay prepared, you don't have to be prepared. And I do believe this is one of those components. So sponsors, if you're looking at this saying, we'll think about DAPs in phase 3 when it's due, it's gonna be very costly for you. It's gonna be very costly. I highly recommend you consider this in your clinical design when you start an entire program. This has to be integrated if you want it to work. And so that's kind of where, you know, when FDA said phase 3, that's kind of like saying, okay, that's when the final DAP is due. But maybe that's actually another comment is FDA, maybe you need to make a recommendation about when the draft is due, not necessarily just when the DAP is due. Because the way that it reads, it's like, okay, it's just a box to check off in phase 3. But I don't think FDA really highlighted, except for this line right here, how much this has to be done in the very beginning.
I agree.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a great point. And I mean, I think that's medicine as a whole, though, Fox. That's I talked about with my EMT and paramedic students. But it was be proactive instead of reactive.
That's my word, Mitch. Like we always have
proactive and reactive.
You don't want to get down the road. I mean, everyone hates that, right? You submit something to the FDA and then they come back.
They change their mind, or you think they changed their mind on you, and you just weren't following the rules in the first place.
Yep.
And you know, a lot of sponsors are doing that. So sponsors, just, you know, we're here. We want to try to make sure that you can save money. So if you do it right the first time, you can save money.
That's exactly right.
So this last paragraph, this is actually just kind of doing sub considerations, not necessarily requirements according to the DAP, but things that you might want to think about for the rare disease, special needs, autism community. Just so you know, on line 131, we were included. The term mental disabilities is right there, and some of the things that you might consider. Other ones, so there's your socioeconomic status, sexual orientation, gender identity, geographic location. There's my research desert, friends. So FDA did a very good job talking about the other people that you might consider as a sub-DAP, so to speak, like other considerations. when it comes to targeting participant populations that meet the needs of your NDA, of the drug that you are targeting. So that was I'm really glad they kind of added it in there. Although whenever you see where is it? It says like FDA recommends or they do something like that.
Yeah, it's
encourages.
It's
There
encourages. Yeah. I hate that too. It bugs me. We
Yeah.
encourage it, but you don't have to.
We
so no one
encourage
cares.
it. I mean, it's there, but I mean, so I can see, the sponsors out there reading that and be like, oh, okay, FDA.
Thank
Cool.
you.
Thank you. Thank you.
But we're not that. Thank you, but we're not
I
doing
appreciate
that.
your encouragement.
Yeah. Thanks for the encouragement. Yeah, you don't have to foot the bill, so we don't want to do it. So I mean,
Right.
you're always gonna have that kind of a thing running, and good kudos to FDA for calling it out. And I get it. Maybe they can't enforce that. They can only enforce what they can. But I think they are right, though. I mean, let's talk about targeted marketing. When you're trying to market a product to someone, I mean, we're looking at Facebook, online, whatever it might be. You are trying to find the perfect customer for your product, and you want to make sure you customize to them because you want to optimize your business.
Yeah.
So I think that there is a really good intention behind that, but there could be a business intention too. There's a motivation there on a financial level.
100%. Yeah.
Right, Anonymous?
I think we talked about that to begin with. The aspect of making your drug viable and suitable for everyone, or ensuring that it's safe and tolerable for the entire global population, as opposed to just one subset of individuals. But there's the other odd thing is that when everybody talks about the cost of conducting a trial to make sure a drug is safe for a diverse representative group of people, it's like, okay, well, how much money in the United States specifically are we then putting in post-marketing, and really when we're actually trying to market the drug and sell it, all the money that goes to advertising and try to get these patients to walk to their doctor's office and say, hey, I want this drug. It's like, I saw this commercial with a butterfly. I'm depressed. I want that butterfly drug.
Yeah. I mean, it only makes sense on that level, on a marketing level, to consider this as part of it.
Right.
So this is going active. Thank you, Kelvin. So I'm trying to figure out where. Okay. So Kelvin is saying on line 109, in general, clinical study diversity helps ensure clinical studies appropriately test the product in a representative sample. Yeah. So they kind of threw diversity in there because it's the buzzword. But how exactly do you define that? What is diversity?
Yeah.
That's a good point. Do they even define the term diversity?
They don't. It's not defined in here at all. You're right.
That's a very good point, yeah.
So good job, Kelvin. Thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe we ought to have Kelvin come on here at some point if he's interested.
Oh yeah.
Talk about that, and we want to have guys. And by the way, guys, this is not a closed stage. We have a link if you want to come on here, if you want to talk, as long as you're within scope. You go off on a soapbox, and we might have to maybe cut it because we're here to get a job done.
And Kevin would be a good source.
So, all right. So we are 3 minutes over the hour. That's all my comments. Mitch, Hadi, do you have any more comments you want to address?
Wonderful starting point for us. Love what we did, and hopefully we'll hear from our audience and followers, and we'll push it forward.
Great. Yeah. And again, this is going to stay open. I'll make sure that I probably try to post these links to the future sessions. So all the sessions that we have coming up are already laid out. So go ahead and click, interested or attending all of them, just get them on your schedule. And then I will drop the open for comment Adobe Acrobat files in each of those. So we can add comments as we go. That way you can get in ahead of time and leave comments so we can review them when we have these events. And then look for the SWOT analysis follow-ups and additional comment follow-ups and things like that as well. That's all I had.
Sounds great. Thank you so much.
Great. All right. So for everyone, every Friday, 10:30 in the morning Central, please stay tuned all the way up to Labor Day. We're going to be doing a bunch of these. Next week, we're going to be talking sections 3 and 4. What trials are qualified for DAPs and what should we be doing? And a little bit more of a background on addressing DEI in clinical research and what we're doing. Sections 3 and 4, please check out the link below. Put your comments on the intro and background. Please start to engage. Reach out to us if you want to come on here. Get ready for sections 3 and 4, and know that what we're doing right here is actually going to get put into an actual FDA comment. And it's very possible. I was thinking, guys, what do you think about submitting it live? Like hitting that submit button live so that we can all be engaged in it.
Yeah, we'll see. That's not a bad idea.
Love
Pretty
it.
cool, huh?
Love it.
All right, so be sure to subscribe to the DiversiTrials channel. Mitch, I think you're going to send us out. We'll see you guys next week.
Yep. Take care.